They didn't pull triggers or leave blood at crime scenes, but they brought cities to their knees and corrupted systems from the inside out. One moved billions through invisible channels. The other turned terror into business. Neither has served a day in prison. Who's more dangerous, the man who manipulates the world's money or the one who sets it on fire? Be patient and stay with me until the end of the video. Welcome to Red Dossier.
Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening.
They never met, yet their names share the same whispered tone in the corridors of global law enforcement. One built an empire in silence, moving billions across borders without ever lifting a weapon. The other ruled with spectacle and terror, turning crowded cities into battlegrounds. Semion Mogilevich and Dawood Ibrahim represent two faces of transnational organized crime. One financial, methodical, almost surgical. The other theatrical, militant, and soaked in violence. Mogilevich, born in 1946 in Kiev, emerged from the ashes of the Soviet Union with a sharp mind and a background in economics. As state assets collapsed into private hands, he saw opportunity, not in seizing territory, but in seizing systems. Through networks of shell companies, false identities, and offshore accounts, he constructed a global financial architecture designed to obscure the origins of billions. His portfolio included securities fraud, arms trafficking, extortion, and human trafficking operations that moved women across Europe under false labor contracts. The FBI once estimated his financial crimes exceeded $10 billion. He has been on their 10 most wanted list since 2009, not for a single murder, but for the systemic erosion of trust in global financial systems. Dawood Ibrahim, born in 1955 in Mumbai, was the son of a police constable, raised in the dense slums of Dongri. Unlike Mogilevich, his path began in the streets, first as a smuggler, then as a gangster, and eventually as the head of D Company, a sprawling criminal enterprise spanning South Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. His involvement in the 1993 Mumbai bombings, which killed 257 people and injured over 1,400, marked him not just as a crime boss, but as a state enemy. His organization has been implicated in drug trafficking, contract killings, extortion, and human smuggling, often under the protection of political regimes. In 2003, the U.S. Treasury labeled him a global terrorist under Executive Order 1324. At first glance, their methods could not be more different. Mogilevich rarely appeared in public, surrounded himself with lawyers and accountants, and manipulated financial loopholes with the precision of a corporate executive. Ibrahim, in contrast, embraced notoriety, appearing in photographs with Bollywood stars, flaunting wealth in Dubai, and fostering a cult-like loyalty among his followers. Yet beneath the surface, they shared core traits. Both exploited legal grey zones across multiple jurisdictions. Both wielded influence far beyond their home countries, and both operated within the protection of fractured, corrupt political systems that allowed them to thrive. Criminologists classify Mogilevich's structure as a decentralized network with transnational reach, a hub-and-spoke model where regional operatives report indirectly to a hidden center. His style echoes white-collar criminal syndicates, often insulated by layers of legitimate business fronts. Ibrahim, on the other hand, ran a hybrid cartel with paramilitary capabilities, resembling traditional mafia hierarchies but layered with ideological components, particularly after his links with Pakistani intelligence and extremist groups were exposed. His structure bore more resemblance to the Medellin cartel under Pablo Escobar or the Guadalajara cartel under Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. Psychologically, their contrasts are as instructive as their crimes. Mogilevich is described in intelligence reports as calm, unemotional, and intellectually distant, believing that financial power offers greater safety than guns ever could. Ibrahim, by contrast, is reactive, vain, and deeply invested in image and personal loyalty. While one vanishes into the system, the other demands to be seen. Their backgrounds shape their paths. The lawless vacuum left by the Soviet collapse allowed Mogilevich to institutionalize corruption and expand through states too weak to resist. Ibrahim's rise was a response to urban neglect, sectarian tension, and a legal system failing to protect the underclass. Where Mogilevich found gaps in oversight, Ibrahim found fractures in identity and used them to build a violent, populist empire. This opening chapter has laid the foundation. 2 criminals, 2 systems, 2 philosophies. What follows is not just an account of what they did, but how they did it, how systems collapse, how trust corrodes, and how power is constructed from shadows. In Part 2, we will examine their specific methods, operational structures, psychological drivers, and how these contributed to their rise and ultimately their unraveling. Criminal empires are not born overnight. They are built through years of testing the system, identifying weaknesses, and exploiting them without hesitation. To understand how Semion Mogilevich and Dawood Ibrahim became global threats, we must look beyond their names and into the mechanics of how they operated, the blueprints of their empires, their psychological wiring, and the invisible scaffolding that held their crimes together. Semion Mogilevich's methods reflect his academic training. With a degree in economics from Lviv University, he approached crime as a logistics and finance problem. Following the fall of the Soviet Union, a chaotic transition unfolded across Eastern Europe. Currencies fluctuated wildly, national assets were privatized without oversight, and regulatory systems were either outdated or compromised. In this legal vacuum, Mogilevich launched a network of over 100 shell companies, many registered in tax havens like Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands, camouflaging criminal activity behind the appearance of legitimate trade. One of his most notorious operations involved the Canadian-based company IBM Magnix, whose stock soared on the NASDAQ while secretly laundering money for Eastern European gangs. In 1998, the FBI raided its Pennsylvania offices, exposing a fraud involving over $150 million. His human trafficking operations followed similar logic: cold, scalable, efficient. Women were recruited from impoverished regions in Ukraine, Romania, and Russia, often with promises of jobs abroad. They were moved through a chain of intermediaries, fake travel agencies, and corrupt immigration officials. By the time they arrived in Israel, Italy, or Germany, passports had been confiscated and their labor turned into coercion. Mogilevich's hands never touched the victims. They were processed through systems designed to maximize profit and minimize liability. Dawood Ibrahim's operations, in contrast, were rooted in personal allegiance and territorial control. D Company, headquartered in Karachi and with outposts in Dubai, Nairobi, and South Asia, functioned like a paramilitary organization. It was involved in heroin smuggling from Afghanistan, arms trafficking, and extortion rackets across Indian cities. But its most disturbing revenue stream came from trafficking young women from Nepal, Bangladesh, and India's poorest regions. These victims were often sold into Gulf state brothels or retained within Ibrahim's entertainment and vice circuits in Mumbai. Witness testimony and police reports linked D Company to hundreds of disappearances between 1985 and 2005. Where Mogilevich operated in silence, Ibrahim thrived on spectacle. His subordinates were expected to display loyalty through acts of brutality. One of his lieutenants, Abu Salem, became infamous for executing rivals in broad daylight. When loyalty faltered, punishment was swift. Traitors were tortured, killed, or publicly humiliated. Ibrahim maintained order not through contracts, but through fear and reputation, amplified by his portrayal in Bollywood films and street law. Psychologically, Mogilevich is seen as a detached strategist. He reportedly avoided drugs, alcohol, and unnecessary attention. His goal was longevity, not dominance. By the early 2000s, he had established connections with senior political and financial figures in Russia and Ukraine, shielding him from Western extradition. He didn't build an army. He built a firewall of influence. Ibrahim, meanwhile, remained volatile. His decisions often reflected personal vendettas or political signaling, such as his suspected role in funding Islamist groups in Kashmir after the Babri Masjid riots. According to Indian intelligence dossiers, his D Company operated with support from Pakistan's ISI, turning a crime syndicate into a quasi-political actor. In terms of damage, the consequences of their actions ripple far beyond borders. Mogilevich's financial manipulations undermined investor trust, distorted emerging markets, and laundered billions into legitimate economies. The human cost is unquantifiable. Families shattered, women trafficked, and systems corrupted from within. Ibrahim's operations brought Mumbai to a halt, with bomb blasts that turned marketplaces and train stations into war zones. He left behind not just bodies, but a blueprint for how organized crime could merge with terrorism. Yet for all their influence, both men made mistakes. Mogilevich's overconfidence in his corporate facade led to the YBM scandal, which pulled him into the global spotlight. Though never convicted in the West, he became a marked man, restricted to the few countries that refused to extradite him. Ibrahim's misstep was strategic exposure. His open affiliations with religious extremists turned him from a criminal fugitive into a geopolitical liability. His movement is now limited, his network fragmented, and his wealth under watch. Both have become ghosts, present but untouchable, commanding fear more through memory than actual reach. Their stories, however, continue to evolve in courtrooms, financial reports, and political backchannels. Part 3 will examine what remains after such men vanish, the systems they created, the ideas they spread, and the dangers that persist. It will explore legacy, not as a historical note, but as an ongoing threat. Criminals like Semion Mogilevich and Dawood Ibrahim do not vanish simply because they disappear from the headlines. Their names may fade from international press releases, but their fingerprints remain on systems, economies, and broken lives. Their legacy is not a myth. They left behind networks, ideologies, and methods that still shape how modern organized crime functions today. Understanding what survives them is not only a matter of retrospection, it is an urgent inquiry into what continues to undermine justice in the present. Semion Mogilevich's empire, though structurally weakened after the exposure of the YBM Magnex scandal, did not collapse. The financial techniques he employed, multi-layered laundering, offshore company chains, and market manipulation, became templates for white-collar crime in the post-Soviet bloc. Experts in transnational financial crime have documented how former Mogilevich affiliates integrated into new ventures, legal and illegal, continuing to exploit weaknesses in Western banking regulations. While the man himself remains shielded in Moscow, reportedly under the informal protection of powerful figures, the architecture he designed persists in different forms, now more automated, decentralized, and encrypted. Mogilevich's long-term impact lies not just in the money moved, but in the erosion of trust in global finance. As investigative journalist Bill Browder noted during a 2012 hearing before the US Senate, the Russian mafia is no longer just Russian. It has become an international business model, and Mogilevich was its architect. This model has inspired similar entities across Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and even parts of Latin America, proving that white-collar crime, when scaled and protected, is more dangerous than any single act of violence. Dawood Ibrahim's story closes on a darker, more visible trail. After being designated a global terrorist, his movements narrowed to the shadows of Karachi's elite enclaves. Though Pakistani authorities deny his presence, multiple intelligence agencies, including India's RAW, the CIA, and Interpol, have traced his operations to protected zones near military facilities. While D Company's influence in Mumbai has diminished, splinter cells continue to operate in regions like Dubai, Nairobi, and parts of the UK, where real estate, casinos, and hawala networks serve as platforms for money laundering. More dangerous than his network, however, is his narrative. Dawood became a symbol for a generation of disaffected youth who saw in him not just a criminal, but a figure of defiance. His integration into Bollywood's underworld mythos, his portrayal in films and underground stories, turned him into something larger than his crimes, a legend, a warning, and for some, an aspiration. This romanticized villainy masks the reality of his terror. Survivors of the 1993 Mumbai bombings, many of whom still live with scars, both visible and invisible, are the silent counterpoint to this distorted image. In comparing the two, it becomes clear that both men found and exploited the blind spots of their era. Mogilevich operated in the grey spaces of deregulated capitalism, Dawood in the chaos of urban inequality and religious tension. One corrupted from above, the other from below. Both understood that systems, be they legal, financial, or ideological, could be weaponized. But there is a question that lingers. Who truly was more dangerous? Mogilevich destabilized economies, infiltrated banking institutions, and trained a new class of global financial criminals. His work damaged the integrity of markets, and the effects remain embedded in loopholes exploited by corrupt elites worldwide. Dawood left cities burning, bodies uncounted, and fear that still lives in the collective memory of a nation. His actions redefine the boundary between organized crime and terrorism, a line that is now blurred in conflict zones from South Asia to the Middle East. Perhaps the more important question is not which of them did more harm, but why neither was ever brought to trial. Their continued freedom exposes the limits of international law, the convenience of political alliances, and the selective blindness of systems designed to serve power. Both men operated within protections that shielded them from the very consequences they inflicted on others. And this is where their legacies are most haunting, not in what they built, but in what they revealed. That criminality, when systematized and aligned with influence, becomes nearly indistinguishable from authority. That justice, without reach, becomes a performance. And that in the modern world, the most dangerous criminals do not hide in shadows. They thrive in plain sight, behind bank accounts, security details, and silence. Their stories are unfinished. Their structures still breathe, and their lessons remain warnings for the future about ambition without limits, systems without oversight, and the quiet violence of impunity. Two criminals, two continents, two empires that still cast a shadow over our world. So who left the deeper scar? Semion Mogilevich, the invisible architect of financial chaos, or Dawood Ibrahim, the outlaw who weaponized fear? We've laid out the facts. Now the question is yours. Who truly changed the world in darker ways? If this story challenged your view of crime, power, and justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's more where this came from. Thank you for watching Red Dossier.